unemployment rates. It is more likely that California's current economic situation is one of the things that's contributing to the 5% drop in the overall supported employment ratio. What kind of data do we need to do a better, to track California's success in promoting competitive employment for people with disabilities? Information such as employment success ratios, earnings, employment retention, consumer satisfaction, and the type of employment should and continue to be tracked. It's somewhat difficult for our various departments to track data because you asked us what are the barriers to data collection. We have federal guidelines in terms of data elements that we have to track. What we call, even to some degree, what we call disability, what we call a successful outcome is different from some of our other departments, from what EDD may call, what Department of Developmental Services, how education, how we all track data is different. So we don't really have the opportunity to compare apples to apples. We got fruit salad instead, So everybody's a little bit
someday.
Okay. In closing, Again, I can't thank you enough for bringing and spending the time on this. The majority of individuals with developmental services are also receiving some type of public assistance, including Social Security, Medi-Cal, Medicare, or both. Increasing employment opportunities to individuals to be productive members of our society, contributing taxpayers, and becoming less dependent on cash and public resources is what we're all here about. I know you'll be talking later about post-secondary education. Most recently, the department, in collaboration with the community colleges, is embarking on a new initiative to address the needs of individuals with developmental disabilities. The Department of Rehabilitation, the California Community College Chancellor's Office, and 5 competitively selected local community colleges are developing a college-to-career program. And Olivia, I'm sure, will give you some more details on that, but I think the outcomes of this will be something that we would like to report back to you later on.
Well, thank you very, very much. That'd be very important. And now we're going to go to Ms. Newton.
May I comment?
Yes.
I just wanted to say that the comments with regards to the effects of budget cuts on employment and the ability to support people in employment reminds me of what's happened here with the governor's veto in child care. When so much of our economic problems being driven by unemployment, and yet we're making budget decisions that are undermining people's ability to support themselves, it's really counterproductive.
Mm-hmm. And counterintuitive.
It's an important return on investment. I think we're making this.
It's hard to deny, although there is a lot of denial here in Sacramento. So. Self as well as so for Ms. Newton, just let me start off because we do have some time constraints. In our last 2 hearings, we found a need to better serve people in California's very diverse communities. Will the Community First, or rather the Employment First Committee, address the issue of cultural competency for employment support services?
Let me tell you a little bit about, first of all, good morning, Assemblymember Amiano and Assemblymember Chesbro. We really appreciate the opportunity to participate in this dialogue. Would you like me to start by talking about what the Employment First Committee is doing at the Council?
Sure, and then if you could address my
Okay. In 2009, Assemblymember Bell sponsored AB 287, which creates an Employment First Committee that's directed by the Council and composed of representatives of DDS, Department of Rehabilitation, Department of Education, and other key stakeholders. And incidentally, those key stakeholders were very carefully identified to reflect the diversity of the state, to reflect people with developmental disabilities, and also to reflect minority communities. This committee is charged with establishing an Employment First policy for the state of California. It is to issue a report to the governor and the legislature by July 1st, 2011, with recommendations. And then that report doesn't just go on a shelf. It is to be updated annually. So this is intended to be an ongoing group. The Employment First Committee's key responsibility is to identify strategies, best practices, and incentives for increasing integrated employment for people with developmental disabilities, Towards that end, the committee met as a whole in September. There was a group of about 30 people with the representation that I mentioned. A number of people in the audience were at that meeting. And the committee organized itself into 5 work groups by looking at all the myriad of issues around the sagging employment of people with developmental disabilities, recognizing we're not going to solve every problem, and trying to pick out the key issues that can impact this dilemma. And so the 5 work groups that were established will focus on the following 5 issues. One is transition, as both of my esteemed colleagues referred to. We really feel that the whole issue of youth who are going to be exiting the school system and doing a much more effective job of linking these young people into internships, into various training programs, into preparation for college. All these things will lead to better employment outcomes. Secondly, recruiting and supporting prospective employers. Addressing the fears, addressing the concern of employers, and demonstrating how employing people with developmental disabilities can be beneficial to the workforce. Thirdly, to improve information to consumers and their families about public benefits and the impact of work on retaining critical benefits. Again, I'm repeating much of what has been said. Fourth, identifying and removing barriers to successful employment pathways. And fifth, identifying, promoting, and replicating innovative employment strategies, including microenterprise, which is one of many.
Okay. I think we're going to move on now, unless there's any closing remarks any of you would like to make. And I am very interested in the work of the State Council on Developmental Disabilities and furthering the Employment First policy. So please keep my office and my staff informed of the progress of your work. And of course, we'll share anything with Mr. Chesborough's office as well, Mr. Bell, since they have been working on this for a number of years as well. All right?
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And we'll start with our second panel. What do these jobs look like? And we have Michi Yoshi from the WIA program, Tom Heinz, Executive Director of East Bay Innovations, Michelle Turns, Director of Supported Employment, Contra Costa, ARC, Mike Hare, Job Coach in Alliance, Steve Yesley, Post-Press Operations Manager, Sacramento Bee, Carlo Powell, Packager, Sacramento Bee, Lisa Krayeb, Materials Management, Children's Hospital of Oakland, and Joe Medores, Executive Director, People First of California. So come on up. We almost have as many members as we did Chilean miners here, so we can welcome you with that enthusiasm. We have enough chairs. All right, and would you like to start, please? Okay.
Good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me to be here today. My name is Michi Yoshi. I'm with the Oakland Private Industry Council. I'm an employment services specialist with the Workforce Investment Act program, also known as WIA. Just a little background on our organization. We currently, in conjunction with the Employment Development Department, operate the Oakland One-Stop Career Center in downtown Oakland and in the Eastmont Mall in East Oakland. We have 2 resource centers where they provide various resources for job seekers conducive to their job search, including printed materials and computer classes. The Workforce Investment Act program is an employment service program for dislocated workers and various adult populations, which provide job seekers with one-on-one counseling and job search assistance in regards to assessing their barriers to obtaining employment and helping them overcome those barriers. We also have subsidized training and possible on-the-job training opportunities dependent on the individual's need, as well as dependent on our funding. And with that, we are partnering currently with the Oakland Adult and Career Education and East Bay Innovations to provide, basically it's a unique funding source and opportunity where we are assisting with the funds for the Project Search program, which provides individuals with developmental disabilities with in-classroom training and internship opportunities. There are currently 2 cohorts, one at the Oakland Children's Hospital, the other one at the Alameda County Admin Office. So we are funding $4,000 per participant to ensure that the operations of this program can continue. It's definitely unique funding, and it's the first time we're doing this, but it's definitely so far been a success. We do have a lot of other projects, but this one's special in regards to the success that it leads for the participants.
Next.
Yeah, now me. Basically, I worked at a fast food place for 21 years, and after the old owner retired, the new owner decided, I don't want disabled or elderly working in my company, so he just fired them without rhyme or reason. But then, of course, as another door closes, another door opens. You know, basically, Project Search came along, EBI came along, and I went to school, graduated from Project Search, now I work at Children's Hospital. And what I would really, really, really love, if you, the employer, you want to discriminate against disabled, guess what? You're doing yourself a disfavor. You don't realize people with disabilities, so we may look a little different. We may have different problems, but you know what? We can do the job if you just give us a chance, please.
I appreciate that. You're a really prime example of that, and to me, the success really does lie with all the preparatory work with the person themselves, and a lot of people who don't have disabilities are given not only one chance but a second chance, and I think what you're saying is very, very significant, that we need that first chance. We need that entry level.
Like, the thing I would love is if you, the employer, don't want to hire someone who's disabled, hello, you not only do you have to pay a huge fine, but you get jail time.
Dano.
Okay.
All right. Next.
Basically, what I do at Children's is that I make sure that the doctors are saved from a headache of grabbing expired products. I make sure the nurses are saved from a splitting headache. I save the hospital money. And just before when there was a hiring freeze, I found a huge amount of expired products that the Joint Commission could not find. There was only one room I could not get into that they found something wrong with.
And that title is Materials Management. That's
My boss would have hired me right after Project Search was over.
Excellent, excellent. All right, thank you so much.
Good morning. My name's Tom Hines. I'm the Director of East Bay Innovations, and we have the honor of working with Lisa and with Mishi on Project Search. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the two worlds that we have going on at the same time. When I started in the fields, supported employment was just starting in California, and the model that we used was place and train, because the model before that relied on vocational training centers where people didn't really exit the training centers to get jobs. They stayed within the training center. It wasn't very successful. So basically the concept was to throw out pre-training and to do all the training of folks actually in a community job in the real environment where they're going to be working. And that was successful for a period of time. But what I think emerged over the years is that because training before the job wasn't a focus, people didn't move on in their careers. So they sort of stayed at entry-level positions. And Lisa's a good, her history parallels this history in that she worked at a fast food place for a long, long time, 20 years. And really didn't make much past minimum wage over that time. With focused pre-training that's immersed in the employment site, like Project Search is a model that does that, but there's other models out there that pair really focused short-term training on jobs where there's growth and career possibilities, and pairing that with internships on the job It gives people a skill level where they can compete for jobs that are higher paying and have a career path. So, for example, Lisa, can I tell them how much do you make?
Now I make $20 an hour a day, and I work 4 days out of the week, Monday through Thursday. And basically, one of the things I would love to talk about is those that, basically when you have a disability, you don't realize how hard it is. Someone who does not have it doesn't realize, and a lot of these disabilities, some disabilities you can see, but a lot of them are hidden disabilities like autism, dyslexia, dyscalculia. And I think one of the greatest things you can do as you use the employer is to try to train your staff. If you do have someone on your staff who happens to be disabled, go to school, learn.
I'm not very good at moving the mic over. I'm sorry, Lisa. But Lisa's a great example of, she's got this talent for materials management that really is valuable to her employer. And there's jobs out there in this particular occupation. The other occupations that we're finding this model to be working on in the healthcare field is medical records. And we're also looking at central processing, which is basically sterilization of equipment at hospitals, where the wage is really good and there's a fair amount of turnover in the position. It takes long-term training, longer term than many of the positions that we're talking about, but it's very systematic and routine. So in order for providers like us to focus on these new jobs in the future, we need staff who are able to build partnerships with these host employers, which entails finding a way to present the concept to the leadership of the host employer, so articulating the vision of what this could be, and having support staff job coaches that are really great at teaching people these complex systems over time. And also helping, because we are serving a fair amount of people with autism and Asperger's in Project Search, is coaches that are really skilled at helping people read social cues and interact with their coworkers, but do it in a way that's not obvious, do it in a way that's more behind the scenes and consultative.
We could definitely use you up here. Let me ask you about job development, both for yourself as staff, providing direct support services, and for the consumers you work with. What, in kind of a nutshell, what can we do to improve that? And perhaps some of the other job coaches, et cetera, could address that as well.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but the structure of the funding that we have for job development under supported employment is not very effective. Because you're paid a fairly small flat rate only based on outcomes. And that outcome of finding someone a job and having them stay for 90 days can take 1 day to find that outcome, or it can take 2 years. Typically in my agency, we're able to place 30 to 35 people per year. So the funding mechanism, it does not reward this sort of long-term building of partnerships, getting inside an employer and helping understand what makes that employer work. That's number one. Number two is the old style of job development is cold calling, is helping people fill out applications. That's not the world we're in anymore. The world that we're in is understanding where the labor market's going, identifying specific occupations that have a demand and a career path, and then partnering with agencies such as the One Stops and the adult schools or community colleges to train people for those specific occupations.
Well, and the very, very fast rate of change with technology and how it impacts on this particular community. I know with the deaf community, texting has opened up a whole new dimension, to productivity and communication, et cetera. And there's going to be parallels to that all over the place, especially for visually. And some of the things that you mentioned, too, the developments are fast and furious. But yet we haven't established the parameters for quick access and delivery yet. So it's a double challenge.
Mr. Chairman, I really appreciate the very specific nuts and bolts examples of the obstacles to upward mobility jobs and careers for persons with disabilities. But it brings to mind sort of a broader observation I appreciate your response to, which is that in many cases, if not most cases, the limits are to upward opportunity are imposed from outside the individual, either by attitudes or lack of support to help a person develop in their career, rather than it being the disability itself. That we, I think, as a culture, underestimate probably all of our potential, but very specifically what we're talking about today is the potential of persons with disabilities, and we put their disability in front of their who they are, and put an artificial limit. And has it been your experience that when those artificial limits are removed and the supports provided, that people are able to develop in ways that neither they nor others expected?
Yeah. I mean, we're living that world right now where we're seeing it all the time, and I think the best example that we can provide is our efforts to develop jobs within Alameda County, which had a step-up program, which is a fast path for people with disabilities to get into civil service jobs. But only after 10 years, 15 people were hired through step-up positions, and none of those folks had developmental disabilities. The folks that we serve don't always compete well on paper, right? Because they rely on us. We have a 90-person waiting list for job development. Can't rely on us to build your resume, right? Because we can't get to you fast enough. So where the people we support really shine is getting in front of people and doing the work in a supported way. And so that's what makes models like Project Search so effective, because it's really designed to be unpaid internships for a year within the host employment site, like Julia's talking about, that the department's doing. This is a low-risk way for people who are skeptical or maybe a little risk-adverse, because I think supervisors, bosses, don't want to discipline and fire somebody who has a significant disability. That's a huge barrier right there. These aren't bad people at Alameda County. They're great people, but they're not used to sticking their neck out. They don't get rewarded for it in a lot of ways. So this way of exposing them in a low-risk way to the abilities that people have over time broken down those barriers that you're talking about. Yeah.
Thank you, and let's move on.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me here. My name is Michelle Turnus, and I'm the director of the Supported Employment Program for Contra Costa ARC. The program is known in the local community as Commercial Support Services. I've worked in supported employment since 1987, along with Tom. We go way back. And I've been the program's director for the last 10 years. I've provided support to over 400 individuals in becoming successfully employed in the community. My perspective has been formed by my experience starting first as a job coach and then gradually increasing my areas of responsibility to the director of the program. Some of the primary elements in my role as director is management and support of direct service staff and supervisory staff, interviewing, hiring new staff members, staff orientation, ongoing staff trainings, daily and ongoing troubleshooting, scheduling, challenges, issues arising in community employment settings, community outreach, job development, intake of new participants, seeking services, assessment of work skills and work behavior for the individuals that we serve, and contract negotiations and contract development with employers. Components of the role in my position, the role with the job coaches is that I participate in hiring, orientation and training, ongoing support regarding maintaining our relationships with the businesses and the employers that we work with, ongoing performance evaluation. My role with businesses, employers, initial and ongoing contact, developing relationships to promote hiring, and to build positive community relationships with them, resource development opportunities for the program and for the overall agency. Ongoing interactions with companies to assure that their employment needs are consistently filled. The consumers that we serve, my role is responding to new inquiries, and processing intake paperwork, performing assessments, recommending appropriate placement, ongoing evaluation of job performance and consumer satisfaction. Currently, we serve 150 individuals in a wide variety of jobs, including retail, movie theaters, assembly and packaging, light manufacturing, banking, clerical, printing, mailing, janitorial, grounds maintenance, car wash, etc. Some specific examples include processing mortgage documents for Wells Fargo Bank, interior and exterior maintenance work at Rossmore Retirement Community in Walnut Creek, car washing for the Antioch Police Department and the Central Contra Costa Sanitation District, retail at Macy's, Target, Walmart, Petco, janitorial services for Contra Costa Public Libraries, courtesy clerks and general merchandise clerks at Safeway, Raley's, Nob Hill Foods, and Costco. I have to say I was a little surprised to hear that the numbers in supported employment are declining, because that's not our experience at all. We continue to get ongoing referrals from regional centers and other DR counselors alike, and have an extensive waiting list, as Tom said he did as well. So that's not what we're experiencing.
When you say not experiencing a decline, do you mean in the number of people interested in getting jobs, or in the number of positions that employers?
Both. Both.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm going to jump in here. We have a few other people who wanted to be part of this panel, so perhaps those of you who have spoken already could leave the table, and then we could be joined by the others. And could we go on to the next speaker? Are you ready to conclude?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks a lot for inviting us. My name is Mike Herr. I'm a supported employment job coach, and I work for InAlliance. We're a nonprofit that's been in Sacramento, placing people with disabilities in jobs here since 1952. We used to be Sacramento Vocational Services, but we changed our name. I'm also the resource coordinator for one of our departments. I help people with disabilities train in new jobs and keep the jobs that they already have. I do this by checking in on them at the job site and meeting with their managers to find out what they need help with, learning new job tasks, learning employment culture, and assisting with training. The most important service that we provide is our partnership with both the consumer and the employers. Our job is to help the consumer keep their job, and the best way to do that is by making sure the supervisor is satisfied with a quality employee, disability or no disability. We've been working with several companies now for over 20 years, like the Sacramento Bee and Save Mart, and we've been working with companies like Vision Service Plan for over 10 years. The employer knows that if the consumer has a hard time learning a new task, we'll be there to help out. The first supported employment consumer that I worked with started his job as a landscaper. His supervisor showed him how to replace the blade on his edger one time and then moved on. But the consumer didn't get it the first time, but I made sure that I was there every time that he needed to replace it and showed him that over and over again. And after about 5 times, he changed it himself. And instead of being fired after 2 weeks, he's been working there for 4 years. So we not only coach people on tasks, but also values. One consumer was picking up bad work habits from his coworkers. When the customers drove out of the parking lot and forgot items in their shopping cart, the workers were all supposed to return the items to lost and found, but instead they were sneaking the items to the trunks of their cars. And the consumer told his job coach that he thought this was a great idea, but the job coach reminded him that it was stealing and he'd be fired if he got caught. Eventually, the coworkers were fired, but the consumer had learned better work ethics than his non-disabled coworkers and actually kept his job. The biggest challenge that I've seen to people getting jobs, in my opinion, is public opinion. The average person assumes that everyone with a mental disability is weak, unskilled, or slow, but that isn't true. They all work in, at least at my company, they all work in jobs where if they don't keep their supervisor satisfied, they get fired just like anyone else. They also have the opportunity, though, to prove themselves just like anyone else. One of my consumers works at a supermarket. He's won their top award for customer service several times, not because they feel sorry for him, but because he's a hard worker and he knows all of his customers by name.
Let me jump in here. How does the consumer interface with labor and unions and union shops, et cetera? I'm sure that comes up.
They're
exemptions? Is there inclusions?
They're union members just like anyone else. And for the most part, I think I have about two consumers that are members of unions. The unions never come in. One of my consumers did call a union one time because he had trouble getting to work at night. The supervisor changed his work schedule to be at night, and since he uses the bus system doesn't work that well late into the night. He would have probably lost his job if he had stayed at the night shift, but the union stepped in, and I don't know what went on, but basically they asked them to change it back to daytime.
All right, listen, thank you. And our next speaker, Mr.
Another quick question. You made reference to what excellent employees the individuals have been, but there was an earlier comment from, I think, Alameda County about some employers being afraid that it would be hard to discipline or fire a disabled employee, and that fear, not realizing what the general experience has been, which is persons with developmental disabilities are very good employees. But have you experienced that being an obstacle to employers hiring in the private sector? I think the other individual gentleman was talking about government employees, but in the private sector, has that been, in your opinion, a factor?
The few employers that have said that they would be concerned about firing the employees was mostly because, let's say they worked at a supermarket and they were saying, well, if I fire John Doe, what would the customers say because they love him so much?
The public image.
Yeah, but then at the same time, if they weren't doing very well at customer service or they weren't, bagging your groceries quickly enough, the customers would be not so keen on keeping, seeing them every day.
There was a interesting, I guess you could call it an experiment I saw on TV where there was a developmentally disabled employee, and they hired someone to make a fuss about that, to tell him to hurry up, and then to test what the general public's reaction was to that. I am happy to say that people did stand up for that employee. They were not part of the effort. They were just shopping at a Safeway or what have you, and they did interfere with the harassment. So it gave me faith there, and all this proves, the point that people make very, very good employees, and that the general public is very satisfied. All right, sir.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me today to talk about one of the many hot topics between my peers I'll talk about today. Again, my name is Joe Meadows. I'm the Executive Director for People First of California. And People First of California is run by and for people with developmental disabilities. We have many local chapters throughout the state. I always loved working, but I still remember my first job where I was in the day program, and I was one of the youngest there. I think I was in the 10th grade at the time. I didn't care about how much money I was making. It was around 50 cents an hour. And I was working about 3 hours a day. In the summer, my hours did increase to 8 hours a day. I still remember my first paycheck was $65 every 2 weeks. I thought I was rich. Well, while I was in the workshop, there was many things that I didn't understand. So I just stayed to myself and didn't say much I was scared that I might lose my job. I thought to myself that there wasn't many increasing, but I could buy whatever I want for myself. One of the first things I saved up to buy for myself was my class ring that I have on today. But by my senior year in high school, made little money. I was making $1.35 an hour. I didn't like the way we were treated at the work program. But in a few months before I graduated from high school, I started to speak up for myself, speak to my father and people in the day program that I didn't want to work there. And I didn't want the state or the state service, and I want a paid job so I can pay my rent and my bills and other things that I want in my life. I want my own bike for transportation. Today, I've been gone from the day program for almost 25 years, and I don't even miss it. So I believe that we should have job coaches to help us. Fortunately, I had my community support me, but I believe that we should have job coaches and support, and we should support them in ways that if they do something awarding and giving, let's pay them the money they deserve. A lot of job coaches I know as friends around the state and around this country, how are they going to make it? Of course, minimum wage is different in each state, but how can they make it we're not paying them the money, they're helping my friends or my peers to train them to have the quality job they want.
Excellent point.
And so let's pay them something decent so they can stay around, not in 6 months turn in. So, well, I'm going down the street to another agency. All the agencies are competing. So let's give them a wage that they deserve and deserve right. So there are many people like me in your community who wants to work, but tell them they can't work or they should just let the state or the federal government take care of them. And I think that's wrong. We should help people work and give them back to the community.
Okay.
And that's what has given back to me.
Thank you. Well, it's because we value you, and we're not talking about charity here. We're talking about gainful employment and productive employees. So I thank you so much for sharing your experience.
And one more thing, I see almost every day when I'm walking or walking, because I don't drive, so I take public transportation wherever I go. But some of the things I see everywhere is sometimes our own prisoners are getting treated better than we are. Yeah. And so, and they are working, and then they're hiring us who doesn't have a felony. So that's why our job coaches are important to us and to help us, to train us and teach us the proper support we need in the community. Thank you
so much.
I'd just like to thank you for your advocacy. I think consumer advocacy is so important, and you've been a real leader. So thank you very much for your outspokenness on behalf of all individuals with disabilities.
Thank you.
Thank you. And speaking of that, sir?
Good morning, Sacramento. My name is Carlo Powell, and I work at the Sacramento Bee Post Press. We put the ads together with other sections of the newspaper bundles, put them on pallets, and then put them on the trucks that deliver the paper. We're loading the bundles. If you don't keep up with the pace, the machine sending them out, the papers pile up. And when you're loading the ads, you have to keep up, load them with them so it doesn't run out. And if it runs out, then the red light goes out, and the supervisor come over and see what's wrong. Then they only give you like 3 chances, and then they throw you in the back. And that's it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And I hope the video works out.
Oh, yeah.
Otherwise, we'll come back and reshoot it. Okay. All right, sir. Next.
Yeah, I'm Steve Yowsley. I'm the packaging operations manager at the Sacramento Bee. Carlo is an employee of ours. He's a great worker. I'm here to support the cause. We've been working with In Alliance, used to be SVS, for over 20 years. We have 7 or 8 different employees that 7 or 8 different employees that are on the program that are doing an outstanding job.
How many employees do you have overall?
Under my department, there's about 312, and it ranges job duties anywhere from loading inserts, stacking down like Carlo suggested, to pallet jacking for moving inserts, material handling around the machines, to loading trucks. It's been a great program. In fact, we have an employee that did so well that he is full-time at the Bee. He's been with the Bee for over 20 years, I think 22 years. Bought himself a house, bought himself a car. I think he has weaned off Mike, said, I don't need you anymore. So it's a great success story. So.
Yeah. And needs to be replicated.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And this has been a very enlightening panel. And as Assemblyman Chesborough said, we're particularly impressed by the consumers coming because that really puts a face on this whole issue. So thank you so much. And our last panel, if they come up, it is what is the role of post-secondary education and the future of employment within the developmentally disabled community. And Lynn Rivas, PhD, Executive Director, Consumer Directed Services Network, and Olivia Rayner, PhD Director, Tarhan Center, University of California, Los Angeles. Good morning.
Good morning.
Begin.
Thank you. Assemblymember Amiano, thank you for organizing this hearing and giving me the opportunity to participate. My name is Lynn Rivas, and I am the Executive Director of the Consumer Directed Services Network. Our work focuses on workforce development in the developmental disability sector with a particular emphasis on training for direct support workers who provide supports for people with developmental disabilities, as well as promoting services that allow people with developmental disabilities to maximize their possibilities for choice, opportunity, and independence, and that are provided in the most community-integrated environments possible. This is important because support programs vary in how they deliver services and the inclusion, community integration, and normalization a person with a disability will gain. In these aspects, supported employment that results in individual placements is the quintessential community-based service. It results in more inclusion, community integration, and normalization, as well as other positive outcomes for a person with a developmental disability. It allows them to work in a real job out in the community with an opportunity to earn money and develop relationships just like everybody else. Supported employment services are part of the 30-year-plus trend out of institutions and into the community. However, there's been no recognition by the state that these jobs are far more complex than direct support jobs in an institution. Higher level skills are required of workers when they work alone in an employment setting. They have more autonomy, less supervision, and less access to professional staff, such as behavior specialists, for support and assistance. Community-based employment services work by providing people with disabilities individualized supports to meet the unique needs of the person to assist them in working competitively and independently in the community. These needs may range from developing hard skills, such as learning a job task, to refining softer skills, such as interpersonal relationships. For the last year, I've been part of a working group that advocates that includes advocates not only from advocacy groups in the nonprofit sector, but also labor as well as state and federal government. Our mission is to figure out how to increase supported employment services that result in individual placements, not just in any job, but in good jobs with benefits, and furthermore, in jobs outside of traditional placements in food service and retail, and where there's potential for career opportunities beyond the job that they're initially placed in. These kinds of placements will not only be wonderful opportunities for the individual placed, they have the potential to deliver significant savings to the state when they're enrolled in health plans provided by their employer, and they're not dependent on the state's Medi-Cal program. We cannot afford an unqualified workforce that is not adequately prepared to do this work. We need highly trained and qualified workers who can make independent decisions, broker natural supports in the workplace, and maximize the full capacity of people with disabilities. We need to ensure adequate pre-service and incumbent worker training. The Department of Labor, in cooperation with the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals, has developed a list of 15 core competency areas in direct support work. We need training regulations based on these competencies, not just prescriptive topics or hours listed in statute or policy.
If I may jump in, I asked the previous panel about the cultural competency element, especially among our immigrant communities, and I'm sure that presents challenges, but it could also be extremely rewarding as well. So, if you wanted to address that,
I will definitely include it in my response. The other thing that's really important is that workers are paid for their training, and that there are incentives for them to complete the training. A number of states are way ahead of California in training and education programs for direct support workers, and the nice thing about that is that we have models we can follow. In addition, there are several curriculums available that are accredited by the National Alliance of Direct Support Professionals, so here again we don't have to recreate the wheel. A wonderful one is the online curriculum designed by the University of Minnesota's Center for Community Integration, the College of Direct Support, but there are other really good ones out there too. The biggest complaint by individuals with developmental disabilities and their families regarding the support services they receive is by the time they've gotten comfortable with their direct support worker and established trust, that worker leaves and is replaced by another worker. Turnover in this sector is one of the biggest obstacles to quality services. Not only do we need higher wages to help reduce turnover, we also need to establish a credential that's recognized across the state, as well as post-secondary education and career paths. Giving workers adequate training, giving them recognition for that training, and giving them a place to go with their career will also reduce turnover. In Alameda County, we've been working for some time with East Bay Innovations to develop a pilot training program, and we recently got some funding from the Alameda Workforce Investment Board. And so this training is a step in the right direction because it provides career training for 30 direct support workers. But there is one problem with it, and that is that it doesn't provide an educational ladder. And so while these workers will have an opportunity to move up within one organization, they're going to be limited in their ability to move between organizations. Because of this, CDSN, with the support of the California Community College Foundation's Career Ladders Project, approached the Peralta Community College District and asked them to consider developing courses that could meet the training needs of this group of workers, as well as give them transferable college credit. Two colleges within the district, the College of Alameda and Las Positas College, have expressed interest, and we're in the process of exploring the possibilities. But it's a tall order because training in the community colleges will need to meet a variety of needs. For example, workers who work in supported living services do not, as a general rule, need to have English writing skills at the level that are typically required for community college. Therefore, the course offerings must include bridge courses that do not require an unreasonable level of English writing skills in order for the worker or the prospective worker to even have access to the first tier of the training. This aspect of the training is important in order to make sure that we keep the first tiers of training accessible to immigrant workers who are not native English speakers, since immigrant communities often prefer and are sometimes better served by workers who are culturally competent and speak their native language. Now, you don't have to be from that culture in order to be culturally competent. And actually, the College of Direct Support and the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals has courses directed to helping people become culturally competent, even if they're not from that culture. And the other thing is that we need to recruit those populations that will need. So if we want to recruit people from the major immigrant communities, we need to partner with local nonprofit agencies that work with them. And we need to start making training available in different languages. In 2009, CDSN, along with a group of community partners, applied for a Department of Labor grant that would have, among other things, translated some of the College of Direct Support lessons into Spanish. Sadly, we did not get that grant, so to my knowledge, there is no training available.
That is definitely something I would like to pursue.
Yes, we agree, 100%. On the other hand, we want to make sure that these courses truly act as a bridge and help workers to develop not only the skills specific to their job, but also their English writing skills so that they can successfully complete training that makes them eligible for jobs that are further up the career ladder. And supported employment, the job coaches and the job development folks are higher up the career ladder. Workers in supported employment need to have a broad array of skills and knowledge They need skills in systematic instruction and task analysis. They need to know the Social Security work incentive rules, and they need to know the ADA's rules regarding reasonable accommodations. They need to be knowledgeable about the job their client is placed in, the skills necessary for the job, as well as the many types of interventions and or modifications that can help the client be successful in the performance of that job. Sometimes the technical aspects of a job will be no problem for a client. I heard of an example recently where the client had a bachelor's degree and many high-level skills, but because he had Asperger's, had not been successful in finding a job and had difficulty with social interactions in the workplace. His coach is working with him on developing a greater awareness of what his body language is communicating, as well as reading social cues, and he now checks in with his coach for advice about communicating with his boss and coworkers. This is just one example, but in general, direct support workers in supported employment need teaching and relationship building skills, because not only are they teaching the client, they're also teaching the employer and their coworkers how to provide a supportive environment for their client. They further need to be able to explain not only to the clients, but also to their families that a job is a good idea even if it impacts your benefits. At the end of the day, the challenge is going to be funding. But if the state is really serious about jobs first, then the state needs to get serious about providing training for the direct support workers who are responsible to help people with developmental disabilities compete in the workplace. And I can't think of a more effective way to use public dollars than to reward those workers who receive this training with higher wages. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi. Thank you very much, Assemblyman Amiano and Assemblyman Chesborough, for giving me the opportunity to put post-secondary education for individuals with intellectual disabilities at the forefront of perhaps the discussion this morning. I am the director of the Tarzan Center. I'm also on faculty at the University of California, Los Angeles. I welcome this opportunity to speak to you about post-secondary education, as leaving high school is an exciting time for most youth, but is rarely promoted as a viable option for students with intellectual disabilities. I have given you a copy of my comments for today, but I did want to just quickly say that data collection is an issue, and that I would be happy to answer questions about that. There is difficulty in developing a baseline for employment. It's difficult for agencies to speak agency to agency. There are different definitions of terms. You almost need an interpreter to speak between the Department of Developmental Services, Rehabilitation,
Painfully
Social
aware.
Security.
I know. Yeah, it's endemic, and yeah.
Which makes it very difficult to establish a baseline from which we can measure the improvement related to employment, independent living, community participation. And these are obviously very critical for us to know, are we achieving what we want to achieve? Are we moving more people into employment?
Would it be possible with help from members to organize something where, everyone is at the table, and maybe clarification of terms, et cetera, so that we at least could have a jumping off place then, rather than the fragmentation.
It would be a fantastic
All right.
idea.
Maybe we could work on the concept, but actually making it happen.
Yes, and part of it has to do with the confidentiality issues, different regulations that pertain to the different agencies, getting the appropriate releases, authority from the Social Security Administration to track individuals. So there's federal issues and there's state issues, and then there's confidentiality issues.
We need Lisa for materials management.
The other issue that I want to address, because I know it's of great interest to you, is the whole area of cultural competence, which is as important in the post-secondary education setting as it is as we talk about job supports and preparation for workers who work with diverse individuals with developmental disabilities. But I digress a little bit because I've come with my own pitch about post-secondary education, but I would be happy to answer your individual questions about this.
Do you work with the regional centers and the Department of Rehabilitation?
Yes, extensively.
Okay.
Okay, and I will touch upon that a little bit. First of all, I do want to bring to your attention that we have a large number of youth with developmental disabilities to consider as we have this conversation. There are over 38,000 consumers of the regional center system that are ages 14 to 21, and there are 31,501 students with intellectual disabilities and autism in our schools. Now, granted, these are not two distinct populations, but even that is difficult to answer in terms of how much overlap there is between those two populations as an example of the data collection challenges. Most youth at large, leave high school with going two directions. They either get a job, they go to school, or in many cases, they do both. However, as stated by other speakers today, the vast majority of youth with developmental disabilities leave high school and transition into segregated settings, which rarely lead to competitive employment or an integrated and full participation in their communities. In fact, it's estimated that only 14% are employed, and a much, much smaller number of that 14% are actually in competitive integrated employment. With these poor outcomes, greater dissatisfaction with existing services, and the success of K-12 in inclusive education, there's a growing demand for change, both by parents, by students, by professionals, and specifically some of this change that's demanded for is about the opportunity to go to college. It is time to increase the number of students with intellectual disabilities that have the opportunity to go to college to improve their employment outcomes. For the general population, you've heard everybody from, including President Obama, speak to the fact that one of the best ways to improve employability is to go to college. We should offer that same opportunity to youth with intellectual disabilities. While there is only a limited amount of research, that research that does exist clearly indicates that students who go to college are more likely to obtain competitive employment, require fewer supports from the system, have increased self-esteem, and expanded social networks. I think also I think we've talked about low and high expectations on numerous occasions, whether it's the employer or the school, et cetera, et cetera. I think by saying to students that college is one of the on the menu of opportunities for you when you leave high school clearly gives a message of very high expectations of their potential and ability to interact within their communities. While this was not highlighted by the California Department of Rehabilitation in their presentation today, there is data that indicates that students with intellectual disabilities that have completed, on their roles, that have completed post-secondary education have a 58% greater earnings if they've completed a post-secondary education program than those who had not. There's only a 33% employment rate for those that did not have the post-secondary education, and the weekly earnings were substantially less. Those that had attended college had weekly earnings of approximately $348, and those without were approximately $212. While the number of students actually attending college is very small that are supported by the Department of Rehabilitation, these data suggest post-secondary education is indeed a promising practice. I would like now to take a few minutes to talk to you about some very exciting opportunities that are happening here in the state of California that you may not be aware of. First of all, through the newly reauthorized Higher Education Act, which is now called the Higher Education Opportunity Act, nationally, over $10 million of funding has been awarded to 27 2- and 4-year institutions of higher education to implement transition programs for students with intellectual disabilities. All of these programs are a partnership with a local education agency and a 2-year or 4-year college. In California, the following programs have been funded: Pathway at UCLA Extension, the Independent Living Program, the Transition to Independent Living Program at Taft College, and the California State University at Fresno. So you can see that there's a UC, a community college, and State University who are all opening their doors to students with intellectual disabilities with the goal of gainful employment. Also in California, Lana previously discussed the important role that the California Department of Rehabilitation is now playing by offering the opportunity for students with intellectual disabilities to attend a college-to-career program at 5 different community colleges. These colleges are Alameda College, Santa Rosa Junior College, Sacramento City College, North Orange Community College, and San Diego College. These will offer hundreds of youth the opportunity to go to college, to be engaged in inclusive academic opportunities, and pursue a meaningful career. This is a partnership between the Department of Rehabilitation and the Chancellor's Office of the Community Colleges, and the Tarzan Center will be the technical assistance and training provider to this effort. On a local level, I wanted to draw your attention to the East Los Angeles Comprehensive Transition Center. This is a new program that is being established in collaboration between the Los Angeles Unified School District's Center for Advanced Transition Skills and East Los Angeles College, the Department of Rehabilitation, a Family Resource Center, and Easter Seals of Southern California. They've established this center to promote the successful transition of students to post-secondary education and post-school opportunities. The center builds upon an existing 11-year program by the Los Angeles Unified School District at East Los Angeles College, and essentially blends the strength of the educational system in providing transition services and the excellence of East Los Angeles College in meeting the needs of underserved students. I know you raised the issue of cultural competence. It will be very important as part of this planning process and working with the students, of which there's approximately 40 students each year, that we take into strong consideration the values of the families and the students in terms of what they perceive as independent living, what those students perceive as viable employment, as we do the planning and working with them over the course of the 2 years that they're in the program. One of the other highlights of this program in terms of interagency collaboration is a new effort on the part of the school district and several regional centers to develop a joint IEP, IPP process. So rather than, agencies operating on a parallel track, they will interface with each other and develop a joint plan to support students. In the few seconds I have remaining, I just wanted to make a few recommendations. May I take that time? There's a need for improving access to post-secondary education, and to do so, I think we need to strengthen awareness, capacity building, and interagency collaboration. There needs to be greater awareness by everyone, whether it's K-12 personnel, adult disability service providers, the regional centers, the higher education community, parents and families, that post-secondary education should be a viable option for students with developmental disabilities as a pathway to employment, community participation, and independent living. Transition planning for students should be inclusive of post-secondary education so that the planning is happening in the high schools and leads to potential college opportunities for these youth. Paid employment should be set as the goal and expectation for youth in transition programs. It should be noted that colleges alone cannot absorb all the services and support students with intellectual disabilities may need to participate on their campuses. This really argues for the importance of strong collaborations and sharing of resources between the colleges, the regional centers, and Department of Rehabilitation. And I'm really pleased to say it's happening. We have a statewide consortium on post-secondary education that involves representatives from all these agencies and then some, and there's some fascinating and important conversations happening, and a need for clarification at the state level in terms of how to implement policies on a local level so that they don't feel like they're having these covert operations around the state supporting students to go to college. The other part I want to make is that post-secondary education is not a one-size-fits-all. We really want to see that there's a range of options for students, whether it's specific vocational training, adult learning, occupational centers, community colleges, state colleges, et cetera, and that we want to see that there's a variety of pathways for students to achieve their goals. And finally, I wouldn't be an academic if I didn't argue for the need for additional research and the importance of really our understanding the variables that contribute to success in the post-secondary education arena. So I thank you very much for your time and the opportunity to speak with you today. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very, very much. That was very informative. I want to thank our other panel member as well. And I think it's time for a public comment right now. Okay, thanks. So anyone who's interested in making any public comment, could you approach the mic here? I think it's on, Misa. Could you see if that's going to work for people? Great.
thank you for asking for input. I appreciate it. I'm Diana DeRoda, the Executive Director of In Alliance in Sacramento. Certainly appreciate my guys being here today to talk with you about the real life of and the real rubber on the road around employment for people with disabilities. I'm 40 years at this, and I've learned a couple of things and still struggle with some, but wanted to provide some concerns and perhaps some solutions. We've worked with supported employment since its inception, and to tell you the truth, we can't pay people enough to provide the continuity of services that is demanded by the level of and challenges of people that are asking for employment. You can't sustain a family or a home on $13 an hour, which is what we're able to pay. We did receive a net increase. That was a 10% increase on a rate that was based from 1983 in Virginia. And then received the 4.25% decrease of that rate. So it's not sustaining the quality of staff that we need. And I'm telling you, these guys have been, many of our staff have worked for us for 10 years, and they have 2 or 3 other jobs because they love what they do and they want to keep doing that. It's a real disincentive. I love the transition services. We provided transition years ago through SETA youth program. It was a wonderful way for the clinical diagnosis of kids coming out of school who are squirrely to settle down, explore different kinds of options, and finally decide on something and go to work. And those programs seem to be surfacing again, Project Search, those kinds of things. They really need to be supported with appropriate funding. We Include, which is a great program that was started, barely mentions the provider in their literature. I'd like a little more emphasis on the rubber on the road. And DR, we've worked with DR, have a great relationship with them, 3 months to open a case. So when an employer calls and says, could you deliver somebody to us for a job, we have to wait 3 months to get that person open. We're then squeezed into a 3-month closure, which is the time in DR when you can offer lots of intensive support. We're being squeezed out of that intensive support time into a follow-along time, and then the regional centers are providing 5 to 10 hours a month as their support time that they're paying job coaches. It's not enough for the level of folks that we're being asked to
Thank you for the reality check.
Thank you.
It means a lot. Thanks.
It might be pointed out in response that obviously the greatest impact there is on those with the more serious disabilities. I mean, the people with the lesser disabilities probably need somewhat less support, so that the impact is most profound, it seems like, on the people with the more serious disabilities.
Ma'am?
Thank you. Hi. I'm Barbara Mazey. I'm the director of Contra Costa ARC. You heard from Michelle Turnez, our director of supported employment. Thank you for allowing us to make some comments. I want to just tell you that I'm having the same experience here today that I had at the Employment First Committee, because I'm serving on that committee. And the experience was that a group of very learned, experienced, and well-intentioned people are getting together to talk about how we can make more meaningful, gainful employment for people with disabilities. And the oddest thing is there aren't any employers in the room. And that's the thing that always stops me in my tracks. The people who really know where the rubber meets the road aren't here when we have these discussions. And I really want to send each of you, I hope you will look at it, a very brief DVD that I have that was made by many of the employers of the 400 people that Michelle has helped to support. And what they always talk about is the importance of that support. I think the most important sentence that was said here today was said by Mr. Yeisley, who was from the Sacramento Bee. The first thing he said was, I've employed one of the employers, Sacramento Bee employer. I think he was the only one here today that's a private sector employer. And he said that he had 7 to 9 people working in his division at the Sacramento Bee. And the first thing he said was, I've been working with In Alliance for 9 years. It was quiet. He said it quietly. But from the employer's point of view, the primary point of contact is their link to the support agency. And that's what you'll hear in the DVD that I sent you. So that's something I think that needs to be pulled into this. I would love it if the primary barrier to employment for people with disabilities was an attitude problem or just a funding issue or the economy. But that support is really key. So I wanted to point that out. And also 2 other quick points. I have always in these meetings some cognitive dissonance, because I just want to say the importance of training is it's very important, and we do it all the time. But it's not training. It's not a lack of training for us. It's what Diana said. It's that people who are committed, well-trained, and can do it, they can't stay in the jobs because they're not earning enough. And the last thing is, the other little cognitive dissonance thing for me is the reason why I think the numbers are down that DDS reported, that supported employment numbers are down, but day programs are growing by 1,500 people a year. A lot of those day programs are doing employment under the day program vendor category because they can't afford to do it under supported employment anymore. And I'm talking jobs that are, some of them are with a lot of support groups, but a lot of them are independent placements. And I don't think DDS is allowed to report it that way, but that's where a lot of people are getting their jobs. Thank you.
That was important for us to hear. I did want to clarify, we did have another employer scheduled, Ms. Taggart from Oakland Children's Hospital, but she had to cancel due to illness, and I look forward to seeing that a DVD. So, Chesborough, do you have any closing comments for us? And I'll wrap it up too.
Well, this has been excellent. I appreciated the somewhat more, what's the right adjective here, of provocative comments of the public testimony, because I think it's important to realize the real problems that are out there that people are facing, and that's helpful. Because I think we all want to pat ourselves in the back and think we're making progress, but it's good to be reminded about all of the difficulties budgetarily and otherwise that are creating a drag on our progress that we need to be cognizant of. So I appreciate everybody's participation, and it was very helpful to keep me focused and increase my focus on the very important issue of employment for our citizens who live with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, this was a fairly well integrated panel interaction. I think one of the things that is very salient here is, of course, the disparate entities and communication issues and various jargons that don't always gel or mean the same thing to other community people or advocates. Again, consumer participation is right up there in my book with employer participation. And, all of us are on a learning curve. And I do appreciate the focus and the commitment of people. And it's definitely an uphill battle. I mean, California is still at the bottom when comparing the number of people with disabilities in competitive or supported employment. So Mr. Chesborough is right. We're going to save the patting on the back for the future. But in the meantime, our commitment is real, our focus is real, and our doors are open. So just thank you, everyone, for your participation today. I look forward to working with you in the future. And go Giants. Thanks.